Hi everybody, Luke here, and with
Wayne
and
Phil.
and we're here to talk about Bulge German. First things first, probably want to talk a bit about the history of this book and kind of where we sort of are starting from.
Well, the events of September 1944, which start this book, were rather unique. The German army in Normandy had been almost completely destroyed. The Allies thought everything was just going to be a piece of cake from here, dashed all the way across France, across Belgium, into Holland. And suddenly the Germans started striking back with units and formations that just hadn't existed before. And this first part of this book covers those formations that fought the airborne forces in Operation Market Garden, fought the Americans in the Lorraine campaign. Then there was a sort of pause in operations as everybody tried to sort of sort themselves out. And then the Germans struck again in the Ardennes in the Battle of the Bulge, hence the title Bulge German.
So, I mean, the interesting thing about that is a lot, they built the Panzer Brigades to use on the Eastern Front, ended up using a lot of them on the Western Front. And then when you get around to the Ardennes, you'll see the same divisions that you saw in Normandy now in the Ardennes because they've had time to rebuild them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the Germans winter attack straight through the Ardennes, aiming for the sea to try and do what they'd done in 1940, cut the British army off from the American army. Didn't work. The Allies had figured out how to fight a lot better, but some interesting actions there. And then the last part of the book covers Operation Nordwind, which happened in the second half of the Battle of the Bulge. When the Germans were getting pushed back there, they launched another offensive further south. One of the new kit groups that are coming out is the Armoured Half-Track upgrade kit that allows quad FLAKs, single FLAKs, all sorts of other support vehicles. And the Panzer Brigades, the infantry in a lot of them, were completely armoured. And because of the Allies' air superiority in Normandy and so forth, they had so much flak. Not much infantry, but so much flak.
So for the brigades, they came with quite a lot of anti-air just because of the fact they couldn't maintain that air superiority.
Well, the flak platoons are kind of designed to be, as well as providing anti-air cover, to firepower for the infantry. They're like basically mobile armored machine guns.
Yes, because you get two of them. Two, not two. Three.
It
depends on the one.
But the Panzer Grenadier unit that doesn't have all the assault rifles has 4 flak platoons, 2 infantry platoons, some 75mm guns, some flamethrowers, and some mortars, and some Panzer 470 tank destroyers. So. Yeah, it has lots of mobile armoured light firepower.
But also, both of those 2 units also allow you to, your compulsory units can either be 1 Panzer Grenadier and a flak.
I mean, they are basically rated as aggressive because they are so fresh. They've basically only had a month's training as a unit. Or less before being sent into battle.
I mean, if we go back to the earlier formations in the brigade section, which is the tanks, it does mean you can field the new Panther Late, which is the G model. It's got 1 more frontal armor, and by taking them in the brigade options, it allows you to, normally Panthers are kind of expensive, but this probably allows you to field a whole actual company of Panthers if you want to. Yeah.
3 Panthers for 20 points. That's really not bad when you're taking Panthers at all. I actually just noticed as well, one other thing we probably want to talk about is the assault rifle team, because that's with the STG-44. That's a new release. It's the Volksgrenadier assault platoon, I believe.
Yeah, so I mean, it works similar to, if anybody's familiar with the SMG teams, it works similar to SMG teams, except they've got a longer range. They have a range of 8 inches, 20 centimeters, instead of 4 inches. So it allows you to get a bit more fire in before an assault, but they're purely aimed at being assaulty troops. You get in there, you pin down the enemy, and you get amongst them. Yeah. One of the changes in the Bulge book is that Panzerfaust teams with Panzerfaust now have limit 2 in this book. So that means when you go into an assault or you have some shooting, you can fire 2 of your teams with Panzerfaust instead of just 1, like you can in D-Day and Bagration. Yeah.
Can kind of actually move through the book. So now we're getting into the SS section. So
Yep.
that's something.
Now we're into the Bulge stuff.
Yeah. So now we're into the Ardennes itself.
Yep. Yep.
So what's not to like about the Tiger 2?
Yep. 101st SS gets a new name and a new tank. This comes to 501st. And front armor 16, anti-tank 17. It's the bee's knees in terms of heavy tanks. Of course, it's moderately expensive, even though its rating is aggressive. They still haven't really had a chance to improve their quality. They've lost so much in Normandy that the crews are a bit dicey. But
yeah, so and the other thing to mention, with the SS troops in the Waffen SS book, they get the old hand for the HQ. So the HQ, he's still aggressive as well, but his skill rating is veteran, so he can drive up and be next to a unit and help them do tactical movement orders.
So you want to do blitz moves, shooting scoots and so forth.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Not to mention that aggressive rating is somewhat negated by the fact that you've got more front armor than a lot of allied weapons in the game right now.
Don't let them flank you. You're easy to hit and you've only got 8 armor.
75mm Shermans, probably not a massive problem, but a bunch of 76mm Shermans or some Hellcats or something like that around your flank, that's a bit of a problem.
Firefly in the flank.
Yep.
SU-100 in the flank.
So there are ways to deal with them. They're not invincible, thankfully.
But they are tough.
I do notice that we have infantry in the formation. That definitely makes it a bit harder to break the formation.
Yeah, well, this Tiger unit in particular is to represent the guys who hung around with Piper's camp group. And Piper had them all mixed. He kind of had he brought the Tigers forward sometimes, and he had Panthers leading the thing. So sometimes the Tigers and the Panthers were mixed up, and there was always infantry around. So we've allowed you can take a Panther with these, a Panther unit instead of a Tiger unit in your second black box, and in your third unit box, you can either have Tigers or Panthers or one of the infantry options, one of the SS infantry options. Or there's even a Fallschirmjäger one there as well.
Right, we've got the Panther SS as well. That's another heavy tank platoon.
Yep. So this is, this gives you the late Panther with one more front armor, but also it gives you a kind of mixed, because it's in the same kind of camp group with Piper. It's got you've got your mixed options in your formation. Yeah,
they've got more motivation and they're more trained than the previous Panthers as well. I've noticed.
I mean, it's more like a small battle group rather than an actual company as such. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got the same sort of options as the Tiger 2.
Yeah. Although one of the interesting things is the paratroopers, the Fallschirmjäger that Wayne mentioned before. These guys are as green as a lot of the German troops there. So their ratings are fearless, green, aggressive. These guys are still sort of gung-ho. They just don't quite know how to do it properly. So Panzer Grenadiers, Panzer IVs, Panzer 470s, all the usual things you'd expect. The interesting one, though, in many ways for me, is the 506th Tiger company. These guys have got Tiger 2s and they're quality. Now, they're not fearless like the SS, but they are careful and veteran. So these guys are actually quite resilient in terms of, sure, once you start knocking them out, they figure that, okay, we'll sort of back off. But until that point, they're quite hard to get hold of because they can be clever using their stormtrooper rule. And they're careful, so hard to hit, even if you get flank shots on them.
Yeah. And a last stand of 2+, so chances are you'll have that last Tiger hanging around a lot longer than you might expect.
And they have some old Tiger 1s floating around with them at the same time.
Yes, they absorbed the Tiger battalion that had fought in Market Garden. Yeah, right. Camp Group Hummel.
Just looking as well at the formation as well, that Tiger platoon can take up the second black box, so it can make your formation just a little bit cheaper.
Because they're good quality, and the King Tiger, the Tiger 2 is an expensive tank.
Yeah,
so
it's a very expensive formation.
It's a good way to get your formation on the field, is to have that second one as a Tiger 1. Yeah.
Then we have some quality German Panthers.
Yep.
Now these are going to start getting a little more expensive. They're 12 points a piece. But they're basically the last of the high-quality German troops. And and they've got the latest tanks with the late Panther with its increased frontal armor and its big chin mantlet to try and block the weak spot under the gun.
It's quite good in this book because you've got like you've got like 2 different Panther formations and 2 different Tiger 2 formations, so you get to choose off of
three Panther formations.
You get a lot of different choice between the different ratings in this book. Oh, we've got Volksgrenadier. That's probably definitely worth talking about.
Yes, Volksgrenadiers. The Volksgrenadiers are basically after, I think, probably, when did they start deciding to do the Volksgrenadiers? It was kind of
basically at the end of Normandy. They changed the title of infantry divisions from infantry division to People's Grenadier Division.
Yes.
It was purely a motivational thing. You're not just a normal soldier, you're a grenadier. And you're a people's grenadier. You're here to save the people. Of course, what it really meant is you're a half-trained conscript being thrown into battle to replace all the guys who've been killed.
Yeah, I mean, the main organisational changes, apart from kind of political and promotional changes, was that the actual main Volksgrenadier companies were now made up of 2 assault platoons and 1 rifle platoon. Now, the rifle platoon is like a normal grenadier platoon. It's a rifle MG, so it's got rate of fire 2, halted, rate of fire 1, standard, normal range, like 16 inches, 40 centimeters. But the assault platoons are a mix of assault rifles and MGs. We tried out a few ideas on how to do that, and in the end, what we did is we just made all the teams in the assault one STG-44 assault rifles, but then gave them an option that 2 of the teams can be used as MG-42 teams, so which gives them a longer range.
The limited 2 rule, same as the Panzerfaust.
Yeah, so
which also I noticed the Panzerfaust are limited 2.
Yeah, so you can use you can have 2 teams sit back and lay down a bit of long range fire while the other guys approach and assault. And then when you go in, 2 of those other teams can be Panzerfaust, so if you're knocking out tanks or whatever. Yeah.
Makes them very flexible. Right.
They're not particularly high quality. Once again, they're very much like the Panzer Brigade troops. But yeah, you can get, I suspect, I mean, they've got integrated Panzerfausts. You can add Panzer Shreks. You have infantry here that are basically tank-proof. And, you know, you put them in a dug-in position, they're going to be hard to move. And as long as they've got enough firepower coming to support them, I'm sure they could advance quite nicely into opposition.
Now we're into the JAGDPANTHER Tank Hunter Company.
Yes. Panthers with an 88, a long 88.
So these guys, they seem to serve mostly on the Western Front, the JAGDPANTHERs, for some unknown reason. I'm never quite sure why they never committed to the Eastern Front.
They're overgunned for the Western Front, but the Germans seem to think that the Western Front was the critical one. Presumably it was, given that, you know, the Allies from both flanks arrived at, you know, the centre of Germany about the same time, despite they put all of the best equipment against the Western Allies. But yeah.
Yeah, so we feature a couple of different battalions, just a bit of background history on those.
So yeah, good quality troops, standard earlier like D-Day quality stuff. Armoured like a Panther, 9 frontal armour, 5 side armour, and an anti-tank 17 gun. Yeah, they're moderately expensive again, same as the new Panthers, coming in at 12 points apiece. But they'll stop most guns, they'll knock out anything on the table.
Yeah, there's 3 more anti-tank than a Panther, so you've got 17 instead of 14.
Yep.
So,
they'll just go through ISs, they'll just go through just about anything without any saves. Yeah, they're no good in assaults and not much good against infantry, but to back up, for instance, your Volksgrenadiers, put a platoon of these guys behind them, and the tanks are just not going anywhere near them. They can't close because of all those Panzerfausts and Panzer Shreks, and if they stay at distance, they're going to have difficulty killing the JAGDPANTHERs.
I also noticed that the Hornice shows up for the first time in the book, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the problem with the big tank hunter units, the heavy tank hunter units, was some of the things they were meant to be fully equipped with one thing, production couldn't quite keep up, and they ended up being given a. So these guys, one of these battalions had a company of Hornices instead of the JAGDPANTHERs. So Yeah.
So the Hornissa is basically the same thing as a JAGDPANTHER, but armor 2 instead of 9.
Yes. Same gun, but yeah. And then and in some units had Stugs, like
Yeah.
So it's
a
real
chance to give you a different way of handling the heavy stuff. It's the first time that the Hornissa was seen in the West as well.
Mm.
So it's a really good, like, nice mix of different tanks.
Yep.
So you can do quite a lot with it.
Now, this one is just beautiful.
The
JAGDTIGER.
JAGDTIGER.
You didn't think that the Tiger 2 had enough armor and a big enough gun? No problem. 17 armor, 18 gun, firepower 2+. Is that enough? Hit kill on anything.
The units that got these, like both the JAGDPANTHER and the JAGDTIGER, they were old established tank hunting units, and they initially started with things like Hornissas or Marders, and they just slowly moved their way up and got heavier and heavier as time went on.
And since their job was basically to sit back and shoot, rather than to get stuck in, their casualties tended to be lower, so they tended to keep their trained crews longer than a lot of the other units. But like the JAGDPANTHER, the JAGDTIGER is not a great assault tank. It's sort of definitely a sit back and shoot tank.
And now we're actually in the support section.
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
There's separate SS support, Army support, all of the usual things you'd expect, until we come to this one.
Yes, I figure we should talk about the STURMTIGER.
STURMTIGER.
Yes, that is certainly a nice beastie. So it's an old chassis Tiger, so Tiger 1, but up armored to 15, with a rocket launcher that fires around about this big.
In the when they were using them in the kind of, it wasn't the Ardennes. They were moved up, and they thought they might use them in the Ardennes because they thought they might follow them behind, and they may be used to.
If they had any city fighting in particular, they were planning on using.
But in the end, they just sat back, and where they were sitting was actually in Germany, firing into either Belgium or Luxembourg or wherever it was,
across the border at long range. So they're basically an artillery piece.
Yeah.
They don't have any real direct fire, or any direct fire capability apart from a machine gun. But what an artillery piece.
Yep, their special rules include they're allowed to fire at things like bunkers and
nests,
as artillery, which you normally can't do. And also they count. They don't get any drawback.
Penalty to hit.
Yeah, no penalty for being one or two guns firing. Yeah.
Mm.
Just because it's just one big explosion.
Such a massive explosion. Yep. I did want to quickly jump back and note the GRILLE Late SS gun platoon. That is a new model of ours. I've got two sitting on my desk actually.
Oh right, yes, because our previous GRILLE was the earlier model, which is the H, which has the gun more in the middle. This one is very similar to our Marder 3M, which is the Marder. I don't know what we call it.
So they've re-engined the Panzer 38T chassis, moving the engine to the middle, and move the gun to the back. Yeah. And it's either the 75mm anti-tank gun of the Marder or the 15 centimeter of the GRILLE.
Yeah, the HETZER flame Panzer.
Oh yes.
The
HETZER was made available in Bagration German, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So you've probably seen the sprue and you wonder, what's that weird little stubby gun there? Yeah. That's for the HETZER flame Panzer.
No, we included the instructions, but I think we teased it slightly that it was going to come, and now it finally has arrived. Probably want to touch actually on the HUMMEL because that's a plastic kit.
That's a new plastic kit.
Really nice.
So the kit does, both. Yeah.
Yeah, Wayne's been putting some together lately. I've been watching, and they go together fairly well.
Yeah,
I can't wait to build a couple myself.
Yep. So for those who don't know, the HUMMEL is a 15 centimeter self-propelled artillery piece. So one of the biggest artillery guns in the game, short of the STURMTIGER, in an armored chassis, and not too bad. 12 points for 3.
Yeah, all the
usual support options. So you've got
Nebelwerfers. Oh, Panzerwerfer 42s. Yeah. That's the first time it's been on the Western Front for us. It was in Bagration, but they had brigades of them during Ardennes, etc. So
yeah, they had some in Normandy as well. But it's sort of now the kit's available.
Yep,
we've actually got the classic 10.5 centimeter artillery. I think it's in 2 different flavor? It's in a couple
Well,
of different
that's
places.
your standard army ones, because a lot of panzer divisions had towed artillery as well as self-propelled. But there's also a Volksgrenadier one, which has a slightly lesser rating, and also because of with artillery, you need the experienced, well-trained guys to actually conduct bombardments. They went from 4 guns to 6 guns, so they would have to have less staff as such to fire. So they'd have the same number of guns in their battalion, but they'd be in less batteries. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the game, if you've got lower quality skill, you can compensate by having the 6-gun reroll.
It's clever. And the last kind of new unit we're releasing is the ME-262 fighter bomber.
Yes.
Yes. Jet fighter bombers. Woohoo!
What, the first of its kind, I believe.
For ground attack work, yep.
Yep. They were because they're originally designed as an interceptor, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were flying as bomber interceptors, but they also, because basically the big German bombers couldn't get through, they figured that jet bombers might be able to get through and still do some damage, but it was getting a bit late for that.
Not to say it's not slatch on the table though. It's only hit on 6s.
Yes.
It's a bit fast.
Yeah, that represents just how fast it's going. That you can't really point many guns at it.
Yep. 30mm guns or 500-kilogram bombs. A ton of big metal and explosive dropping on you. Now, one of the great things about this book is the 3-part scenario that Wayne has revamped and put in here.
Yeah, it was. This was Mike, I think. Mike Horter used to work with us. That's his original one. We played it. Went up as an article on the website. We played it here many years ago as a big group event. The scenario is designed so you can either play all 3 tables set up and is played as one big event if you had a club or your store, or you can just set up each individual table and play that table, collect all the bits that go off and on, etc., and then move on to the next table.
Yeah. So it's basically the Germans have got to start at one end of the table and travel 5.5 meters or 18 feet up the table to the other end, taking bridges and objectives and things on the way. And with new American sort of troops turning up each time, and the Germans largely just deteriorating in numbers.
Yeah. You start with a finite number, and you have to try and do as much as you can with that. I think there's a good variety of stuff in this book. I mean, it's because it's covering so many different things. There's a real mix of things you can do with it, and a lot of times you can paint something up, try it out with one army, and go, maybe not this one, but I'll use those same models to build this one instead.
Yes. There's not a lot of visual difference between whether you're low quality troops, medium quality troops, high quality troops, SS troops, whatever.
It's only I mean, with the SS guys, it's maybe some markings and your uniforms for your infantry are slightly different, but not dramatically. Yeah.
But an awesome book. It's one of my favorites, and.
So we're kind of halfway through our Bulge part of the late war journey.
Yes.
Over halfway. I mean, it's hard to split 3 books in half.
But yes. I mean, the British are still coming.
Yeah, we've still got one more Bulge book to do.
British after these, and then moving on to something else.
Like a lot of our releases, not everything quite makes it into the book, which is where command cards come in really handy. We've got Scorsese's Commandos, I think that's how you say it.
Skorzeny.
Oh, Skorzeny, yeah.
Yep. Zany Germans.
that's a good way to remember it.
It's a Prussian name, isn't it?
I presume so. I have no idea.
Which is
sounds like it.
Sort of Polish, but not.
I'm really not super familiar with them beyond a couple of photos I've seen of some very unusual looking panthers.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, 150 Brigade was a brigade that was meant to be disguised as Americans and kind of infiltrate their way through the American lines.
Yeah.
They had troops going around and moving signs about and changing things. They had guys who could speak English going forward and telling Americans that something was happening but wasn't really happening and misdirecting people. Plus, they had the brigade had tanks. They had Panthers disguised as M10s. Stugs, we think disguised as priests, but no one's ever sure because they didn't
really look like priests at all.
They didn't pull it off very well. But they also used captured M8 command cars and
armored
cars and things like that.
Yeah, so the command cards for them are quite interesting. There's a command card for organization for their weird stuff. But one of the really fun ones is enemy disguises, which makes your unit disguised. So the enemy, the opponent, their troops don't know whether it's friendly or not. So it makes it difficult to shoot at you until you start shooting first.
They've got to double check. Right?
Yeah. And then there's ones like the spread rumors and reverse road signs that muck around with your opponent. So reverse road signs makes your opponent have to re-roll a reserve roll. So your opponent sort of finally gets the reserves on, success, and you go, no, they went off that way, roll again.
So yeah, that's just one of the things we've got in the command cards.
Yeah, there's these books are called Bulge, but they're really covering a period of time. So there's a bunch of command cards that cover things from Market Garden, some of the weird camp groups that the Germans threw together to stop the British and American advance. Yeah.
Yep. And some, as usual, some oddball equipment that didn't really make it into the book. So one of them is, for instance, the Stuka zu Fuß, which we saw in Bagration, makes its return. So your half-tracks can basically have big rockets stacked on the side and just fire an artillery bombardment. A useful little trick.
And I think as well, the other one, I kind of briefly glanced through these, but we've got a couple of heroes. I think we've got, was it Piper himself is in the command cards as a hero? Basically, I think he's in a Panther tank, if I remember.
Yep, and Otto Carius, who only died recently.
I guess probably worth going through. Like, what's everybody's favorite model or unit? Like, what would you be sort of looking at?
The Panzer Brigade Assault Company in the half-tracks. I did it in resin and metal ages ago and never sort of completed it, and would love to redo it with the beautiful plastics that are the whole thing in plastic. Just yes.
Well, because I'm doing doing a bit of everything German at the moment. I'll probably go with the one I started first for this, which is the JAGDPANTHER. So I've already painted 3, and I'm working on another 4 at the moment. So then there'll be some Hornices as my third.
That's
platoon.
what the Hornices were for.
Yeah, I spotted those on the desk. And for me, it's got to be the Tiger 2. I'm sort of already mostly dedicated towards doing a Waffen SS Tiger company. With that, thanks for tuning in, listening to us. Be sure to keep up on our social medias. It's where we post all of our news, as well as the website. We'll all see you all on June 6th when it launches.
Farewell.
Like and subscribe.